Hello, everyone. Just wanted to say that it's an absolute pleasure to be here in Belgrade today with this fantastic snowy weather. I heard it's not very common that it snows in Belgrade, so I feel very important. I'm going to start this speech with a story. I really like to tell anecdotes, and this one is one of my favorites, which is the story about when I turned 30. I know, this gives away my age a little bit. When I turned 30, something fundamentally started to change in my social media. I started to get a lot of pregnancy ads. I started to get a lot of ads for baby things, baby clothes, pregnancy, marriage, all these things that people expect a 30-year-old woman to be doing. Yeah. That was not really in the plan. I was quite focused on my career. So it started to bother me a little bit. And I was discussing with a friend of mine this fact. And she said, you know what would be funny if you change your gender on social media to male? I wonder what is going to happen, if it's going to change a little bit. And I changed my gender in all social medias to male. Everything. Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, whatever. I was a man everywhere. And to my surprise, it did change. It changed significantly. Because suddenly, I was getting ads about opportunities to work as an engineer abroad, MBA opportunities. I was getting all sorts of ads for suits. I mean, I love suits, and I wear them very often, but I have never seen ads about suits before on social media. Sports cars, right? I mean, why can't I have a Porsche? It is quite interesting for me that these ads started to appear. Real estate, buy a large house in Spain. I have never seen this before, ever, on my social media. And this talks about biases. If you're wondering if I got any bad ads, I did get a lot of ads about gambling, cigarettes, and hair transplants, but that doesn't come to case. The thing is, I want to talk about bias. Biases in research. And I will give you a bit of a recap of what I'm going to be talking about today. Everyone is biased. Everyone in this room is biased. And we make biased decisions every day. And some people try to go to classes to understand their biases, to start performing less biases. But what happens is we are biased. Just think about the cave times. You're there in the cave. Then you come out of the cave and you see this bear killing a person. Yeah, you immediately create a bias that the bear is bad. And it was something that was supposed to protect ourselves. But the problem is that we are not in cave times anymore. And these biases are still there. There are so many. Look at this list. Undercoverage bias, ascertainment bias, courtesy bias. Oh my God, what a long list. And what happens when you have this bias and you perform a biased action? You perform a biased action in a world that today is documenting everything. So your action, which is biased, becomes data. You see where I'm going, right? And this data, one day, possibly, is going to feed an artificial intelligence model. And that's where it comes to the situation of today. But before I talk about biases, I'm going to talk a little bit about history. Does anyone know these women? Yeah, you know? These are the computers. Just like a teacher is teaching, a computer is computing. The word computer comes from the women computers from the 1940s and the 1950s, when ICT was a female-dominated environment. Don't get me wrong, it was not seen as something very important. It was secretarial work that they thought a woman was supposed to do. and the computer girls were the future, and it was everywhere. And look at this ad here, for example. A trainee gets $8,000 a year. Wow, this thing's also changed. 20 years ago, a girl could be a secretary, a school teacher, maybe a librarian, a social worker, or a nurse. If she was really ambitious, she could go into the professions and compete with men. Wow. But the thing is, ICT was seen as something for women. And it was in fact not only IT. It was also manufacturing. It was also a lot of other industries. It had a lot to do with World War. A lot of men went to serve in the military. The roles were there to be filled, and women started to fulfill these positions. And what happens is that once men started to come back from war, once ICT started to be seen as something that is requiring leadership, and it's something that is giving a lot of financial gains, women slowly started to be pushed out of these fields. By 1984, you still had 37% of women studying ICT. By 2016, the statistics reached 18%. The statistics have ever since kind of stayed the same because of all the efforts to try to bring women to technology. Before I continue, I'm going to do a quiz. So if you can, please stand up. We're going to play a little game. Let me explain how this game works. I'm going to put a few questions, and you're going to raise your hand. If I tell you that you're wrong, you're going to sit. If I tell you that you're right, you're going to stay standing up, okay? So wrong answer, you sit. Right answer, you stay standing up. Columbia University, founded in 1754. That's an Ivy League university. Started accepting women in. Who thinks it was 1847? Raise your hands. You can sit. 1920? You can sit. 1983? Yeah, you're correct. So everyone else, please sit. The ones that responded 1983 can stay standing up. Wow, I lost a lot of people in the first question. I hope there will be someone in the end. Women didn't have access to university until not so long ago. And still today, in some places in the world, women are actually losing access to university. When was the first female crash test dummy created? So basically, when you are developing a car, you need to see how it's going to react in case of a crash, right? But male puppets were usually the ones that were being used to test. Who thinks it was in 2023? Yeah, you're correct. So if you responded 2023, please stay standing. There was no commercially available female crash test dummy until 2023. And for one more question, when did women participation become mandatory in clinical trials in the US National Institute of Health? Which means that before this date, there were medications in the pharmacy that people had no idea how it would react on women's bodies. Who thinks it was 1927? You can sit. 1987? You can sit. 1953? I'm sorry, you can sit. It was in 1994. And look, it might be just a coincidence, but it was shortly after that Bernadine, it was shortly right after Bernadine Haley was declared the first woman to direct the same institute. Thank you for the 7 people that completed this quiz satisfactorily. And I'm talking a lot about gender now, but I'm actually going to go further into this conversation. I just bring the gender data gap first, because if you're talking about minorities, you can even argue, okay, but we don't have enough data on them. But women are 50% of the world's population. And the thing is, we have little data on how women experience society. And the data that we have is of poor quality, and it's full of biases. I'll start by this example of the car crash test that I was talking about. This was a research that was announced around 2019. It became very famous after Carolina Criado Perez put it in her book, Invisible Women, which is a book that, if you haven't read, please do. It's going to make you very angry. It has a lot of data on how people don't have data on women. The problem about these test dummies is that because they didn't take into consideration a female body, they just got a puppet, which was more or less the size of a man. If they wanted to check how it was a woman reacting to the car crash, they made the puppet a little bit smaller and they put it in the passenger seat. The results are that today, women are 73% more likely to be seriously injured in car crashes. And women are 17% more likely to die in car crashes. And if you remember well, the female puppets were only launched in 2023, commercially available. I know that there were a few very specific companies, if I'm not mistaken, like Toyota, that developed their own female test dummy, but it was not publicly known. But in fact, is that the vast majority of the automotive factories did not have any information on how a woman would react to a car crash. And then we have statistics like this being released every day. Product bias. But we also have service bias. Does anyone know about this study? Recognizing by the picture that became really famous. It was launched by The Guardian. It was a study made by the University of Toronto in Canada. And this study, they published that women are 32% more likely to die if they're operated by male surgeons. And they didn't know why. They just knew that they did the study, they took 1.3 million patients and 3,000 surgeons, and the results of the study were that women were 32% more likely to die if operated by male surgeons, which is statistically relevant. And now they're trying to investigate why, and there is already indication that when a woman is in the post-operatory, she goes to the doctor, she says, I'm feeling pain, the doctor doesn't take it seriously enough. And this goes back to the fact that every act that you have today is being documented, and all these acts can become a data that is going to feed an algorithm. I have another example. This example is from Belgium, where I'm currently based. I started to give these talks a lot, and a friend of mine came to me and she said, I have an example for you, which is from right now, and it's not fixed, and people don't know much about, which is my experience. She was born a man. And she decided to transition and become a woman. And what happens in Belgium, but also in a lot of countries, is that your gender is linked to your social security number, your ID, and if you change your gender, you need to change your number. And for example, in Belgium, you lose all your health data, which dies together with the old number. So all her X-rays, everything that she has ever done in terms of data, in terms of medical data that was there, well documented in her ID, died together with her old self. But now let's talk a little bit more about AI and how we are having such implications into the models. First, I want to talk a little bit about this case, and I told you I'm going to tell you a lot of histories. I'm going to present a lot of use cases today. This one is about a chatbot. It was an idea to create a Twitter, former X bot, and this bot was going to learn from users. So basically, there will be no guardrails on how the models were going to learn from people. They just put it out there, and they said, interact with it. It had to be taken down in 24 hours. It took only 4 hours to become racist, to ask for people to build a wall, and Mexico is going to pay for it. It asked for the return of mass murders. Yes, the trolls went really hard into this one. And perhaps one example that is more known about artificial intelligence is what happened with one of the major tech companies, which decided to automate how they are hiring people. Did anyone talk about this example in this conference already? No? So a big tech company decided to automate how they're hiring people. And they thought, well, we have a lot of CVs of people that have been hired, which means that they're probably very good CVs. Let's just get all these CVs and feed into the black box. And 1 + 1 became 3 when the algorithm decided that since they didn't hire a lot of women, whenever they would see the word woman in a CV, like winner of the Woman in IT Awards, they would penalize the CV. It took 1 year for the corporate to realize that this was happening with their algorithm. Another example, this one in finance. This one is from a tech company that decided to launch a credit card. And at some point, someone went to Twitter, X, and said, this is such a sexist program. My wife and I filed joint tax returns, live in a community-proper state. We have been married for a long time. Everything from this couple was going into the same bank account. Yet, the black box algorithm thinks that the guy, for some reason, that still today they are not able to explain why, deserves 20 times more credit than she does. No appeals work. Imagine if you are a female entrepreneur and you're launching your business and you're already given 20 times less credit just because people cannot even understand why. There were audits done and there's still no conclusion. And then one of the key people in this organization decided to try it out, and he said, haha, yeah, it's true. It also gave me 10 times more credit than my woman. Biases in Gen AI. This one, was anyone here yesterday when the ambassador of Brazil was talking? No? You were? He talked about how Gen AI is portraying Brazilian women. That has absolutely nothing to do with actually how Brazilian women look like. And I have been annoying all sorts of Gen AI platforms on that, and now they changed it. But I used to do a live demo. I don't know if you know, but I'm from Rio de Janeiro, I'm from Brazil. And I would do a live demo saying, please show me a Brazilian woman on a stage. She was never fully clothed. She was definitely not wearing a suit. She was mostly with samba clothes and with a lot to show. And the thing is that these stereotypes are harmful, because the more you show the stereotypes, the more the people believe in it. Stereotypes, such a simple thing. You know that in Brazil, dentists, is really a female thing, female-dominated industry. And there's even bias against men in dentistry. And it was so surprising for a lot of dentists in Brazil to move to some places in Europe and realize that it's the complete opposite, that their men are perceived as good dentists. Because for them, they were born with the stereotype, with the role models of female dentists. Stereotype is a very important thing, and that you still see a lot on Gen AI. And this is one of the, how do I say, toughest use cases, in my opinion. This is a project, it's also in the United States, and typically I mention a lot of projects from the United States because they are more open going to public. I know a lot of these use cases in Europe as well, but we're not allowed to talk in public. This one was a case for courts, justice system. They wanted to use AI to decide whether or not someone should be imprisoned, that should be kept in prisons, that should be released. And it was actually live. This actually was working, and people were taking the data out of it to make their decisions. So they did a study to see if there were biases in the data, and the first studies came out, and it was saying that the AI misclassified almost twice as many black defendants, 45%, as higher risk compared to white defendants. Translation, the AI looked at a black person in prison and a white person in prison and said, black person, not good, which was not true. White person, okay, you can release it, which was also not true. Mistakenly labeled more white defendants as low risk, which means it said, just as I repeated, this is a white person and it's at low risk, which was not true, who then went on to reoffend, because these people were then released, they went to reoffend, and this happened 48% of the time with white defendants, compared to 28% with black defendants. And classified black defendants as higher risk when all the other variables, such as crime, age, gender, were controlled. 77% more likely than a white defendant. So as you can see, biases go way beyond gender. And there is a lot of visibility now on gender biases. As I said, because women are 50% of the world, but biases are affecting a lot of people. And all the white men here in the room, if you think that this is not applying to you, it's because we don't know how the future of AI technology is going to be. Imagine if in the future we have much more Asian-led AI companies that don't take into consideration the faces of white people. We can suffer from these biases as well. So it's not as if it's not going to reach anyone ever. But then what do we do? I mean, because don't get me wrong, I love technology. I'm an engineer by education. I work with AI. I work with AI almost every day. I work with technology. And I am here to tell you that I just want it to work for everybody. I have the feeling that a lot of the policies and a lot of the events asking for more diversity in technology, they only scratch the surface. They don't explain why we need. Okay, we need more women. Here is your quota of 50% and go look for them. Deal. We need to understand that there's literally people dying because we don't have good quality data. And it could be someone from your family that could be affected. It could be someone close to you. And depending on the type of data, it could also affect you at some point. So this is a very serious topic, definitely a topic that should be talked about. But what we also see today is that the whole, let's say, diversity and inclusion agenda lost themselves in the talk. It doesn't attract so much momentum anymore. You see a lot of corporates mass firing people which are working in inclusion. You also see a lot of people in inclusion that don't even know what they're doing anymore. People fail to understand the importance of it. But tell me something. Tell me one industry in the world that doesn't have tech. It's an actual question. Can you name an industry that doesn't use technology? I'm curious. I would love to hear one, so I can use it in the future. Nobody? Because technology today is in the financial sector, is in insurance, is in healthcare, it's in defense, it's in government. It's everywhere. And just imagine all these biases being replicated everywhere. So what is the solution? Well, I'm hoping that this solution is sitting in this room, because I know some people came to talk to me. I'm not technical, but there are some technical people in this room as well. And you can make a difference as well if you are aware of that. I very recently went to, I was invited in the board of a scale-up that was working with AI for education. And they did not know about that. They were already live with a pilot. And they had absolutely no idea about gender bias. And I was a little bit like, how did you miss that? I mean, is this something that comes often to you or not at all? Do people talk about it? Like, do you see it at your work? Are there conferences about it? Because, I mean, I already showed you the data that people are dying because of that. People are dying because of biases, because these biases are being fed into the models. Yeah, but it's still not very talked about, right? So what I want you to do, for the women here that are working in technology, please keep working in technology. Keep making the data better every day. For the men that are here, be an ally, be a sponsor, be aware that it exists. Because one of the things that I get a lot as a question is, okay, I would love to work with AI, I would love to work with technology, but the moment I discover all the biases, I'm so scared what people are going to talk about. But it doesn't mean that the biases are not there. The biases are there. They are already in the data, they are already in the AI. There are ways to correct these biases. If there is someone in the audience that can talk about very technical part of bias correction, I would love to have a chat with you. There are ways to correct it. But the problem is that there's also people scared to discover this data right now. There's people scared of how this is going to impact their organization. And I tell them, go and look for it. It is there. It is possibly harming people. Don't stay quiet. Ask more of AI. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This was very interesting, and I hope we have reactions, comments, questions from the audience starting now. This was very interesting. Yeah. Middle in the final row. Thank you.
I really think that the data you showed us today is a little bit disturbing. But my main question is for you, we know what is the problem, but as an engineer, how you solve this problem? Because we know that there are biases, but when you are making and when you are putting the data in the black box, how we could handle this problem? Can we at all? Thank you.
There are so many ways to handle this problem. I was recently in Romania with a professor who is developing an algorithm which is not black box. So that is self-explainable. And that can say why it made such a decision, and then you know where to correct it. The reason why black box algorithms exist is because they were built this way. And if you build algorithms which are self-explainable, you can perhaps address these issues. There are other ways to work on it. So there are technical ways and there are policy ways, right? Technical ways is working on bias correction, working on educating people about these biases, and so on. You also have policy ways. For example, I work with the government in Belgium, and they consult me sometimes on what do I think, how we should move forward. I worked for a while also in pharmaceutical projects, which were also dealing with AI for medical devices, and we work on it as a group in the product. Another way to work on it would be, for example, working on better policies, having ministers, politicians more educated on the issue, looking for ways to regulate AI in a way that would prevent such things. I was recently in Turkey, was so kindly invited by President Erdogan and the organization that his daughter is leading to talk to politicians in Turkey on what is happening and how we should correct it. So you also have to demand from governments and from companies, especially big corporations that have a lot of funds to work on these things, to also provide better technology for the people. Does that respond to your question? Side question.
Wait for the microphone, thanks.
Sorry, only one. So you mentioned regulation now, but of course we have only one AI Act for now, and it will be maybe the basis for some future regulations. But as far as I know, and I'm in precisely this topic, no regulation tackles deeply the issue of biases, only AI use cases as problematic. So do you have maybe from your experience or your thinking some recommendation how regulations should approach to biases, how biases should be regulated? And that's all. Thank you.
Yeah, there is not a lot of regulation because I think most governments are still trying to learn how to regulate AI in general, and biases would even be a second step towards it. I do think that the EU AI Act already addresses it in a nice way, but it's a more restrictive regulation than if you see, for example, the UK or the United States. I know that Turkey, Brazil, there are other countries working on their current AI topics. It's very important to contact experts on this scope. I met Mathieu Michel not so long ago, which participated in writing the EU AI Act. And he also said one of the things that he missed that perhaps he would like to promote more is have also creative people involved in the process, artists and so on. Because there is still this vision that AI is something extremely technical, that technical people working in AI should be involved in doing, but in fact, that's not the truth. And this is the whole point of everything that I have been saying here. You need a very diverse set of ideas, of people coming with different experiences and different ideas in order to have a better result of products or policy. So my recommendation would be actually just a quote from the person I met in Brussels that was working with it. Have more people on the table, have a very diverse table working on it, not only of experts of AI, but technical experts, business experts, and users, people which are affected by it as well. Yeah, it's a lot of work. But if you're going to do it well, you better work a lot on it.
Thank you. Next question, here in the second row.
Hi, thank you for the awesome talk. Thinking about solutions, I see two distinct problems here when considering bias in AI and in tech in general. One of them is obviously the samples that the data is trained on, and this can be fixed. But the more fundamental problem is the fact that humanity has been biased since the beginning of the evolution, right?
Yes.
So how do we fix this problem? We start fixing it now, and maybe in 50 years we will have AI that is not biased by the, you know, mankind's biases over thousands of years.
It's actually a very good question. It talks a little bit about what I said on, there is the technical answer to fixing biases, and there is the policy or more political, philosophical, ethical answer on how to fix biases. I see it, but perhaps that's a very simple explanation. We can discuss that more afterwards. I see it as a big change management project. You know, if you want to change something so significantly, you can also approach it as a change management project, a very large one on a global level. You need to have more role models. You need to have more people talking about it. You need to give people the tool to actually change. It's not enough to say, hey, you're biased. Okay, what do I do about that? You need to explain to people how to change, where to look for information on or courses. You need to reinforce KPIs because, you know, it takes a lot of effort, and honestly, people are always going to take the path of least effort. So how are you going to do that? There are a lot of companies that say, okay, if you have an active focus on that, if you have an active focus on equality, you get some benefit out of it. It's one of your KPIs. And I think most important is we need to communicate why. Because if you push a KPI, like I said, you can install a quota and you're going to make a lot of people angry because they have no idea why you're doing that. You can give a lot of people the tool to change, and here are a lot of courses that you can follow to unbias yourself, but why are you going to do that? And you can have fantastic role models, but if nobody listens to them, what's the point? This is a very simplistic way of looking at change management. Of course, if you're actually going to reinforce that, the list is very long of things that you need to look into. But it is going to be something in this direction.
Thank you. Next one. No, well, maybe we can finish with this. With the question in my mind, not being an engineer or an AI expert was just like yours. And you've just mentioned some examples which actually last for about 50, something has changed maybe 20 or a year ago or maybe 50 years ago. And I kind of have an idea that a lot of us here don't really believe that these things can change and that the mirror of society in the AI can ever change. Is that a part of the problem?
So I do think that believing that things cannot change is always a part of the problem. And as I said again, you can face it as a change management issue. One of the things that are going to be very important to prove the staticals is precisely showing data. I can't believe that a lot of guys here are a bit shocked about all the data that I showed on gender bias. They are really rethinking, oh, maybe I should have paid attention to that before. I get that feedback quite a lot, like, wow, I didn't really think that topic was concerning to me until you started showing all this data on how women can die about that. So, yes, there is a lot of skepticism, but if you think about how to change people's minds, you can also think about who to target to change. There will be people which you will simply not be able to convince. And there, you cannot waste your time. But there will be people which are a little bit in the center, let's say, maybe not. If you start advocating for these people to realize all the issues that people are having, if you start to target them, then they are already going to be more likely to understand the change, perhaps join the movement, and the stronger it gets, the more people start to believe in it.
What would be the first sign of the change for you?
The first sign of change, I mean, it's a topic in the data science conference, right? I have been in IT I have always been in IT. I mean, I started as an engineer, I started working with nanotechnology and quantum computers, and I have never seen this topic being addressed in big conferences like it is now. People are genuinely starting to be concerned about it, and I think that's the first sign of change.
Thank you very much. We still have some time, no? Okay.
4 minutes.
Thank you. This is a token from the organizers. Thank you very much. Karen de Sousa Pesse was our guest today. Thank you.
Thank you.